Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Big View, Ending Poverty in Your Community. At Circles, our mission is building community to end poverty through intentional friendships, personal transformation, and systemic change, led by the people closest to the challenge. And our vision for the future is all individuals live in equitable and thriving communities where poverty no longer exists.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special episode of the Big View podcast with Circles USA. My name is Kris Alexander. I am the Chief Learning Officer at Circles USA, and I am your co-host along with Kamatara, our Executive Director at Circles USA.
Hello.
So today we are going to be talking about the science of hope. And I am so excited about this topic. I'm going to be introducing our guest today, Dr. Evie Muilenburg Trevino, who is a quantitative psychologist that studies hope. Kind of like how Brene Brown studies shame, except Dr. Evie is studying hope. And so, Kamatara, do you want to talk a little bit just about why hope and circles?
Ugh. Hope and circles go together. It really is, it's essential. And for anyone who has experienced poverty, you understand personally how hard it is to maintain hope, that things can feel so overwhelming and so hopeless, like I can't see the way forward. What's the point? I've tried this before. It never works. Like it's so easy to get in that loop and it's that downward spiral. So when our partnerships and different folks we were working with in the national office said, we know this wonderful quantitative psychologist who is working on the science of hope. And I said, oh my gosh, could you please get us connected? So that's a wonderful example of our organizational social capital and relationship building that led to this beautiful relationship with Dr. Evie. And we thought this is something we need. This is not a want. This is a need because we've already been working on hope through relationships, through the coach that's in the chapter, and through circle leaders being connected with community members called allies, and to have that relationship is like the soil in which hope could grow, but we haven't spoken about it directly. How do we get to that secret sauce of circles? We know it's the relationships, but it's the relationships that are fostering hope. And for our circle leaders, the ones who have the most hope tend to be the ones who succeed the most, but we've never been able to really, how do you articulate that? Could you measure that? How do you make it real? Is it this woo-woo thing? No, what? So being able to speak with Dr. Evie and have her get super concrete about it, that this is science, that it can be measured, that there are things that we could pinpoint that could help us all to move forward, especially when folks get stuck or it feels hopeless, to have like a glimmer of light is just huge. It's a game changer to be able to articulate this and then to deepen our practice of what we're already doing, but now let's do it better and more deeply. And then how do we support that more? It's just been lots of behind the scene things have been happening, just so you all know, like how does this impact different aspects of the circles model and then our resources and materials, which we're all going to get into today. But
I was
it's
going to
been,
say, don't go too far into it.
yes, like it's just been an exciting process, and I'm so grateful to Dr. Trevino, but also that we could begin to roll this out and use this more intentionally and then see what happens next. It's just been such a powerful experience for us in the national office, and now I'm excited for the chapters and our community members to have this experience. So I'm so excited to have more be shared.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and introduce Dr. Evie, because one of my favorite things is when she kind of came on and heard about circles, she was like, circles is already a hope generator. So let's just make it intentional. But let's back up and get really the foundation of the science of hope. So, Dr. Evie Muilenburg Trevino is a quantitative psychologist. She has 20 years of experience working with nonprofit organizations. She was formerly a senior researcher at the Hope Research Center at Oklahoma University in Tulsa, and she now holds a faculty position in the psychology department at ORU, where she continues research and evaluation. And she was telling us a little bit about her classes, and I'm kind of jealous of her students. And her research explores the science of hope as a transformative mechanism with a particular focus on individuals who have faced traumatic life events. And we know that poverty is inherently traumatizing. So, Dr. Trevino's love for people drew her to the field and continues to inspire her daily work. So, welcome, Dr. Evie. It is so good to have you.
Thank you so much, Kris and Kamatara. Goodness, I'm thinking back. It's been several years now, and we kind of joined together. And you described your work, and I was like, "You're doing the work of hope." So let's formalize this. Let's use the language. So it's been a perfect joining together, and I continue to just have such a great time, such a productive time with you all. Kamatara, I'm reflecting back because basically maybe you can now give my hope talk. You said that essentially hope happens in connection with other people. Hope never happens in a vacuum. I'm going to present the core the core components of hope, and we could throw those at a person, and a local person, then they're not going to grow in hope unless they're in community. So I think of allies and the leaders like linking arms, and then that's when we see real change. So anyways, thank you for like a really great intro into getting us started on this.
Yes. Tell us, what is the science of hope? How do you make hope into a science? Tell
Sure.
us.
Well, and I always joke, I'm a quantitative psychologist. That means I like raw data and I like to interpret it. So I remember the first time hearing about hope. One of the most significant claims about hope is one of the best predictors of well-being. Well, I've spent my entire career trying to help people flourish. That in my heart of hearts, that's what I want. And so when I heard hope could do this, I kind of rolled my eyes and thought, show me the data. And I looked at the data, and it's true. It is one of the best predictors of well-being, and that's why I've stayed with this for 15 years now. But hope is the belief that the future will be better, and you have a role to play in making it happen. And if you take that first part, hope is the belief the future will be better. That's passive. You notice that's passive. It's when we add in that last part, and you have a role to play in making it happen, that hope becomes an action statement. And that's what separates hope from wishful thinking. It sets it apart from being optimistic. And being optimistic is a really great attribute. But we see hope has its predictive power because it is an action statement. I see my future positive, but I have a role to play in making that happen. Another important distinction, as I said, that hope is a belief. One of the most common questions I get is hope a feeling or is it a thinking process? It is a thinking process that produces an emotional response. And I make that distinction because if it's a thinking process, we can learn to have greater hope. And that is what we've seen in our research. If we strategically change our mindset, if clients, if individuals can change their mindset, we can see their level of hope rise. When you hear about hope, it may feel like, oh, it's some Pollyanna view. We just need to all be positive, like flowers and unicorns, like life
It's
is
all
great.
good.
Oh, yay.
Ugh, yeah.
But hope is not pretending life is easy. It is strategic, goal-oriented thinking that my future can be brighter if I set goals, if I identify pathways, and then I strategically move toward those goals.
Hmm. I get so excited when you talk about this. Like I have goosebumps because it's so exciting to hear hope is a skill set, right? That anyone can develop. And that makes me so happy, right? Because like listening to you say hope is the best indicator of well-being and thriving and all of that, it's it sometimes can feel like some of these things are either like you are or you aren't, like the idea that optimism and pessimism are like personality traits that you just are inherently. And then it's like, well, if I'm a pessimist, well, made worse by the fact that you're a pessimist. But hope, it's like, oh no, it's hopeful in its hope. Like it's hopeful in its ability to grow.
I also appreciate how it lines up with what we've been saying at Circles for decades, that long-term change can only happen when there's an internal narrative shift. So, what story am I telling to myself? Okay, that has to change before I can have the outer expression of that. So, we know in Circles we're working really hard to get honest about, okay, what story am I telling myself? Is there internalized oppression? Am I shaming myself? Am I having a trauma response? Like, can I unpack what's happening inside of myself? And hope gives us the language. Like, do I believe that the future will be better? Okay, I need to really look at that. Like, what's blocking me from believing that my future could be better? And then, do I have the power to make that happen? Okay, if I can't see it, or I am I in that victimhood consciousness, why am I feeling that? Just to even be able to think about the two halves of the definition is incredibly powerful. That's a powerful conversation, and hard and honest, but that's where some serious rocket fuel happens, or like changing my trajectory if I can change those, if I can develop those two halves of the definition.
That's so good. I heard you talk about imagining a brighter future. Imagination is an instrument of hope. And I'm never going to have a better life if I can't first imagine it. And so, how do I see myself in the future with secure housing, a safe, secure home that my family can grow up in? If I can't imagine myself there, I can't make a goal and I can't make it work towards it. And so, how do we cultivate a place that's safe where I can examine my self talk, what I think about myself? Can I do this? Am I worthy enough to do this? How can we shift those things so a person can then see themselves in a future that is so different, that is so bright? And so that's really at the core of hope.
Ah, I love this because I don't know that we've talked a whole lot about how hope and narrative change and storytelling, which is another big thing that we talk about in circles, how those go together. So I'm really appreciating this conversation of the internal narrative that really has to shift, and kind of going back even a little bit, and I think we'll probably talk about this more because I want to hear also, you mentioned kind of three aspects, Dr. Evie, of hope. But going back to hope doesn't happen in isolation, right? And circles is all about building community to end poverty. And so just that recognition of hope and narrative and storytelling and mindset changes and community, it's all kind of just a circular what chicken or egg, which comes first,
Mhm.
and how do we develop those.
It's the recipe.
Yeah, yeah, it really is a recipe. So tell us, Dr. Evie, what is the recipe, if you
What is
will,
the recipe? I
of
love it.
hope?
Yeah. Um, One of the beautiful things about hope is its simplicity. So over the next several minutes, I'm going to describe these are the three components of hope. And then those are the listeners could walk away and today go tell someone what hope is. And I think that is why one of the reasons so effective is because I can understand the pieces and then I can start using it in my own life. Hope begins with goals. Goals provide direction, they provide purpose. Without goals, people often feel stuck, disconnected, and overwhelmed. Individuals with lower hope, those who are living in chronically stressful environments, they may come into circles. They're thinking about the next 2 days. They're not thinking about, something 2 months from now. Asking them to set a long-term goal would be very difficult. But goal setting is the cornerstone of hope, and we wake up every day trying to achieve our goals. It is the essence of being human. We have goals that focus on achievements or goals that focus on avoidance. And if you'll hold that thought, I will get back to that in just a few minutes. But the nature of our goals determines how we orient ourselves towards them. Regarding achievement goals and avoidant goals, my kids all play sports. Bless them, they're very gifted. Neither me nor my husband played sports. The quick example, my middle son, soccer is his sport. So several years ago, when he was in middle school, they had a new team, and there was about 5 kids who knew how to play. So you can imagine on the field, it was very interesting and exciting. So much learning. So my son gets out on the field, and he gets the ball, and he is ready for it. You can see it on his face. You can see his demeanor. He's ready for it. He's going to make a good pass. He's going to make a goal, whatever needs to happen. Now, one of his buddies, who is very unsure of himself, whenever he gets the ball, his goal is to get rid of the ball as fast as possible so he doesn't mess up. My son was able to set an achievement goal. The other player who was inexperienced, he didn't really know what he's doing. He just didn't want to mess up the game. He didn't want to disappoint people. He set an avoidant goal. His goal was to not mess up. He was trying to not to get a turnover. But you've seen games whenever you can tell of a player, it is written all over their face. And so how they maneuver in the game is completely different. Well, we're the same. If, I'm trying to find employment and I feel confident that I can find a job, I'm going to go fill out applications. I know people to call, right? I've got this. Well, if I have an avoidant goal, I need to find a job as a last resort, but I don't think I'm going to find one. I don't think I'm well suited for anything. As you move towards that goal, it's very different. And lower hope people tend to set more avoidant goals. When we're working with individuals, it's really important to have meaningful goals. Whoever I'm speaking to, if I'm speaking with nonprofits like yours or educators or parents or whoever, I'm like, have you ever had a goal for someone that they did not share with you? Yes, we've all had that. Did that person work hard towards that goal? No, they did not. I could give example after example. And so it's important that the individual finds the goal meaningful. And a lot of times, it may not be that the goal is completely meaningful, it may be overwhelming. They don't have the willpower to support that goal. So, how could you maybe going out and finding employment tomorrow is too overwhelming? And so, you could ask them to, this week, let's think about what are your interests? What do you really love doing? And that's more achievable than this large goal. Okay, goals. That's the first piece. The second piece, pathways. Pathways refer to the ability to identify routes towards goals and equally important to find new routes or to problem solve around obstacles. We need to be asking ourselves if we have the path to our goals. This is strategic thinking, and this is nurtured skill of thought development. This piece takes a lot of effort. High hopers, we have plans A and B, and then may have a backup plan. And then some of us have backup plans to the backup plans. I'm like a pathway generator. I've got so many plans for all of my goals. Um, Individuals who are lower in hope struggle to find multiple pathways. This is, especially important in poverty-informed work because barriers are very real. They're very significant. Transportation, childcare, trauma, unstable housing, limited social support, health concerns, systemic barriers. I mean, we could go on and on. And so someone who is lower in hope, someone who doesn't have a lot of pathways to identify how do we help them learn to problem solve is very key. You know, part of that self-talk is if this job opportunity falls through, what's another route? What can I ask myself? I encourage individuals, if you're working with someone, that role play. So it's not if something falls through, it's when, because this is life and it's going to happen. How do we change what you tell yourself? If transportation is lost, who or what support exists? What are some other options? What small step is still possible today? Instead of completely giving up, what is something small we can do? And we see that hope expands when people recognize they are not out of options, or I can call someone and they can help me find options. And that's when we see hope begin to build, because people, they realize I'm not on my own, and this is figure outable.
Yeah, you just described circles right there. I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I still have an option, or I could take one small step forward, or I have someone I could reach out to. I'm not alone. That's such a good example of how this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in community, to have the support and the process, and to not give up, to just be able to take that next little step. Kris, what were you thinking? You look like you're on
Um,
fire with the spirit.
well, and I'm actually taking notes because, as Kamatara mentioned, this is all getting updated into our curriculum. And so I'm just taking little notes of how you're saying things, Dr. Evie, so this can go in. But I actually have a question for you about this, because I think what ends up happening a lot with our circle leaders, or people who have been experiencing poverty for a very long time, generational poverty, growing up in poverty, is that they have watched their parents, grandparents try to, move forward, get into upward mobility, just the things, and then hit those systemic barriers just over and over and over and over. And then same thing with themselves, even people who are in situational poverty. It's like, you just try and try and try and try and try, and nothing works. And then what happens is they come into circles, and it's like they've given up, and it appears like apathy. And it appears
All
like,
hope
oh,
is lost.
yeah, all hope is lost. And so
Yeah.
how do we support those folks that have just, they're like, before you can even say, well, did you try? I've already tried that. I've already tried that. Like, the system is just, how do we begin to build hope and like open those pathways for people that have just been blocked at every turn over decades and generations?
Yeah. Uh, that's a that's a good question. It's a solid question. And it's not an easy one, and it is not easy to walk people out of poverty.
Mm,
And you all know that. Um, but first, relationship is key. Coming alongside is completely necessary. And
mm,
then as you build that relationship, helping them find a pathway forward.
mm,
And the last piece we're going to talk about is willpower.
mm,
Um, you have to have the willpower to support yourself along the pathways to your goal. And so it's really important, to set a goal that feels achievable to them, a goal that their willpower can support. Because if you set a really large goal and you're like, let's do this thing, and they don't have the capacity to believe in it yet, they will not walk towards it, and it's another defeat. So,
mm,
how do you help them set a goal that is attainable, and then help them find pathways forward? And then, whenever there are setbacks, teaching them there will be setbacks. Things will not always go according to plan. What can you do in those moments? How can you be supported? Um, and continuing to link arm with them in those times. Something that high hopers have that a lot of low hoper individuals don't have is social support. They don't have the resources. If I reach some kind of impasse and I've got a problem, I will call a friend. I will call someone smarter than me. I will pay someone. A lot of individuals don't have those resources. And so, number one, how can we help build those resources? Whether that's relationship, whether that's other resources in the community. So having those resources for them is key. It's hard to trust um, the system or other people when life has shown you they're not trustworthy. So
Hmm.
how do you build those relationships within circles and outside of circles? And so that is my very rambly response to a really big question. Hopefully I kind of got a little bit at the heart of it though.
Yeah, Kamatara, do you want to? I could see both of us like perk up, because that's
Yes.
what we do is that social capital building. That coming alongside. I mean, that's one of our kind of taglines is we come alongside people leaving poverty behind permanently and just walk along with them on their journey. So social capital, Kamatara, what is
Yes.
social capital?
Network of relationships that makes all the difference. And what I love about us building intentional relationships, that's that safe place to land, that soft place to land where it's okay to be vulnerable and say, yeah, I set this goal and I literally can't do it. Okay, well, now we can unpack that when we say, I can't do it. Okay, we've got three things we can look at. Well, was the goal too big? Was it too hard? Do we need to break it down into multiple steps? Were we going in the wrong direction? Like, we can have a question just about that. Oh, okay, maybe the goal isn't the right goal at the moment. Or maybe we're on the wrong path. Oh, okay, well this one didn't work. What's a different pathway to get there? Could we pinpoint that? There's some other options, it's not just this one. Or is it willpower where it's like, it doesn't matter what you put in front of me, I'm just gonna, say no, I can't do it. Okay, that's a tip of an iceberg. Let's unpack that. What's going on for you right now? Well, right now, I can't, my SNAP just ran out. It's not going to make it to the end of the month. So don't talk to me about these job applications. I'm trying to feed my kids because I'm stressed out about my SNAP payments. So it's interesting just to contemplate for our circle leaders and for our allies and for our coaches when one of us is stuck to use these components to pinpoint it, because if it's a willpower concern, okay, then what is going on that's blocking my willpower? That's a totally different conversation and follow-up action steps than if it's, well, this pathway didn't work out or this goal is impossible. Okay, then that's a totally different conversation. So I love being able to pinpoint with these three components of hope, and then it immediately gives me something more manageable to say, oh, well, then my next step could be this. It's such a different conversation. I'm so excited about that. And then developing what we talk about in the trauma of money, which is that fault tolerance. Do you want to tell us about that, Chris? Because
I'm
that's just,
laughing because I'm like trauma of money, which is another kind of organization and mindset that we partner with, and we talk a lot about, or they talk a lot about when you are in that kind of crisis situation, right? Like that trauma, that tyranny of the moment that poverty creates, where you can't look more than 72 hours ahead. Like I'm so busy feeding my family, I'm not going to apply for a job that makes more money because I need to make sure my kids eat, right? And the way they talk about that is you're in this like tunnel of shame, just like spiraling in this tunnel with a wall blocking access to any of those like higher, like longer term, not higher level, but just longer term goals or abilities. And so really looking at like how do we back it up to, okay, the goal is not to get a job interview or to even fill out an application. The goal is to feed your family. And then at the end of the month, when you fed your family, it's like, oh my God, I succeeded in my goal, right? And then like going from there and just it It's just I just am seeing all these parts and pieces, and it's making me think that we need to get one of the trauma of money facilitators onto our podcast for another special episode as a follow-up to this. But I'd love really quick, if y'all are open to it, I'd love to just tell a quick story from my own life that just always runs through my head every time we talk to Dr. Evie or anything about hope. When I was probably 21, 20, not even 19, didn't have a kid yet, but just really struggling for a number of reasons. I was at this, self-help weekend like you do, and one of the things was it was like 2 weekends in a row, and you were supposed to set a goal and then complete the goal and come back the next week and do the thing. And I was in tears in my small group because they're all setting these like big goals that are just really like launching them to their dreams that we've been talking about over this whole weekend. And I'm like crying because I was like, I'm so overwhelmed in my life. Like I literally had to like borrow money to be here. Like there is nothing I can say that I could actually achieve this week. And I remember like the somebody, I don't remember who it was because it was over 20 years ago at this point, but somebody was just like, okay, but like what can you do? Can you go to the library or like can you go get a library card so that you can, and I was like, no, I can't even do that. Like, can you go research this topic? And I was like, no, that feels overwhelming. And finally we got down to like, can you go to the library? Like just go. You don't have to look anything up. You don't have to find a book. Your whole goal this week is to just go to the library. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I can go to the library and like step foot in the library. And I just remember, like, obviously, this was 21 years ago, and it's still just so present in my mind because it was a moment. I doubt they knew that was what they were doing, of like hopelessness, and then like, let's back this up to where you can have a moment of success to build your willpower, to build your belief in yourself enough to say, I can make the future better. I could go to the library when I told myself I was going to. Like, oh, maybe I do have an impact on what's going to happen to me. So that's just the story.
That's a great story. Instead of being paralyzed because things are so big, how do we get out of that paralysis? Okay, here's this baby step forward, and then you start building your successes, and then the beliefs change because there's evidence, which is where we get into the science. I love that there is evidence. I took a step forward and I did it with community.
I felt like that whole small group was able to just support me and be like, and celebrate at me as much as we celebrated everyone else, and not like further shame or be like, oh, well, if you really were committed to this program, then you would do XYZ, right? It was like, we're going to find something you can do, and then we're going to celebrate you as much as we're celebrating the person over here that like got into law school or whatever. I don't know what you can do in a week, but yeah.
Oh, I love that. I mean, hope produces hope. And so, you didn't have our final component is willpower. It's this ability to have motivation to move along your pathways. Well, you didn't have willpower to have some what you might have considered some big grandiose goal. You didn't even feel like you could go to the library and do something specific, but when they said go to the library, you were like, I can do that. And you went to the library. And then you know what? I'm just guessing that another time you went and checked something out, and then you read something, and then it just
Mhm.
hope produces hope. And you had the capacity for that small goal, and this community came around you, supported you, and we see that hope has a ripple effect because once we start changing the belief in what I can do, we see that it continues. You may have a program that's your program is much longer, but we've had programs that are hour and a half to 2 hours long where we have seen long-term impact of hope. Hope rises and it's sustained. Camp Hope is a camp for foster children. I've done some work with them. It's a week-long camp. It's not a therapeutic camp. It's a high impact, high adventure camp. And the cool thing is that, we see baseline levels of hope. And then at the
Mm.
end of the week, we see that hope rises. They do a follow up 30 days later. And as a quantitative psychologist, I would have been really happy to see those numbers plateau. We saw an additional increase in hope. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, how does that happen? Except that hope produces hope. They started to believe that I can make a difference in my life. And so that is how we see individuals with so severely depleted levels of hope over time. It doesn't happen overnight, over time we see this positive increase. And then, 6 months, a year, 2 years later, they were here and now they're here. And that's how we see those big changes over time, linking arms, changing our mindsets.
I love that. That's beyond sustainability. That's actually a massive return on investment beyond the initial, so these little things build, but then it fuels more, like more and bigger and better. And I think that actually captures the circle leaders journey in, on average folks are with circles for 18 months, and to just put that toe in the water, or just, to take those baby steps forward that build into, I am taking charge of my life, and then look at, where I'm headed, and then it goes on to their family members and their children and their mother and their siblings and their neighbors, and like it's building, 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 which is, how our communities are ending poverty. So I love that idea that it's more than just sustainable. It's a huge return on investment. Even the smallest step forward in hope fuels bigger and more hope.
Yeah, well, and I love that you brought in like children, Dr. Evie, because circles really is multi-generational. Every child whose family members are a part of circles, not just our circle leaders, our allies, our volunteers, our staff, every child is welcome in that community. And we have, curriculum that is also supporting them, also creating those pathways for upward mobility in their lives. So breaking, especially like that generational poverty, like breaking it off, before it can even begin in the next generation. So we're both ending it in this generation and stopping it in the next. And so I just love, and I would be interested, I would imagine y'all probably didn't track this because you had no idea, but I would be interested to see like how the families hope builds from just the children coming home with this more like idea of the future is going to be better and I can make it happen, right? I wonder if even just the families just having that little spark in the house also, shifts and uplifts that, which is really incredible to think about.
Yeah, it really is. And when you're working with adults, but you're working with the children, and you're giving them a different picture of the future, like one that they probably didn't know existed because they see what's around them, and so they have this completely different picture of like the future is could be this or this, and before that they didn't
Yeah.
know these other options even existed. So that piece of it, and then their parent language is changing, and then they're learning a whole new vernacular. I mean, the changes that are happening both are just so significant. That's really exciting.
I every time I talk to you, Dr. Evie, no matter the circumstances, I just get so like excited and energized and like this and that and if we talked about this and I love it because
Likewise, I have
yeah,
a blast.
yeah, it is just this like, you know, we're doing the work and also how do we be even more intentional about the work, right? Because um doing something by accident is good, but doing something on purpose, something positive by accident is good, but something positive on purpose is just so like it's such a vision, right? And it
Yeah.
also going back like it increases our hope at like the national office, our staff to see like, oh, we're creating hope, so we're also seeing the future as better, and and we're making it better in this more systemic way, which really then like gets into our big view work of making, not only raising families up out of poverty, but also removing those barriers for entire communities, right?
What I'm especially excited to see now that we've added some hope measurements to our progress reports for circle leaders, and thank you for helping us to do that, Dr. Evie. I'm so excited to see the correlation between, not only to see folks' hope increase, but also to see the correlation. Okay, are the high hopers graduating from circles, like getting to 200% of federal poverty guidelines, or what does economic stability look like for them? Are they getting to that sooner than folks who maybe are the low hopers? Like, what can we say with the data that now is going to be coming to us? Or how does being able to talk about this in our matched circle nights, when the circle leaders and the allies are working together on goal setting and on checking in, like to have a hope check in, how does that deepen the results, the power of what can happen in our weekly meetings? Or how does that impact the whole family now to have the language of hope that can transfer to their home life and to school and to their dreams, not only for the adults to be dreaming again, but for the children to have dreams that could be very possible. So I'm really excited to see now that it's being woven into ally training and circle leader training and coaches and coordinators training, like for our staff, and then to have an actual measurement on the progress reports. I'm just so excited to see what happens next.
Speaking of hope being a science, we have a adult measure of hope and a child measure of hope, and I don't know anyone else who analyzes data and like tears roll down my eyes when I see the positive change that happens, and then we can see why is this change happening. Kamatara, you had mentioned, what is it linked to? What is hope predicting in? And then, what are individuals lacking in? Is it the willpower piece? Is it the pathways piece? Is it the goal? Like which of the three? And so, at the organizational level, we can get a good picture of this is what's happening and this is why it's happening. We go down to the circles groups, the match groups when they meet. Um, they can look at their own lives and say, I'm feeling stuck. Or maybe the allies notice, hey, you're stuck. Do you know what it is? And they're like, oh, the goal feels really overwhelming. What do I need to do? Do I need to break it down? Do I have too many big goals? Maybe I need to set it aside for a month. Or do I just need to find willpower to support it? Like which of the three? And so to see it at the organizational level, what does hope mean? And then at the individual level, really hope helps us find solutions for the individual.
Well, and that kind of reminded me, Dr. Evie, of like going back to that role playing that you were talking about, because I could see fear of some of your pathway not working out, maybe being also why you're not taking that step. Like I'm gonna ask for a raise and my boss is gonna say no, and I'm just gonna feel shattered, right? I've never done this before. And so then, okay, if that's what's causing it to where you're not gonna go have the meeting, you have the willpower, you have the goal, but the pathway feels scary. Okay, let's say the boss says no. Let's role play that. What'll happen next? What will next steps be, Because then it removes that kind of, so really I've kind of always viewed it as like if you're not meeting your goals, it's probably willpower. Like we need to drop it down to something that supports the willpower. But no, it really could be any of those three. And then how do we identify which one it is? And then how do we ensure that that is no longer a factor to that?
Yeah.
And you mentioned Dr. Evie, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when we close, but those hope scales, those hope assessments that you can take are on Dr. Evie's website,
That's
hopewired.com.
right.
So
Yeah.
definitely, there is, as we're talking about all this stuff, and as you are hopefully at home getting as excited as we are having this conversation, there are things you can do, right? You can develop your own hope. You could start like a hope circle, a hope community, right? Go find your local circles chapter if there's one near you, because they're doing it. But for those folks who are, maybe this is the first time they're hearing about circles or big view or hope, or just they've stumbled across this podcast, um what how can they get started? Like, what would be the first step of
Yeah.
getting into hope development?
Yeah. How do we develop hope in our own lives? How do we encourage that in other people's lives? Imagination is the instrument of hope. I've said that a few times. We have to imagine the future we want before we can plan for it. And
Mm,
so consider the possibilities. To high hopers, that's super easy. To individuals who are lower in hope, who life has showed them it doesn't matter what I do, that's pretty risky, but it's worth it. So linking arms with someone and saying, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you work towards? And them being able to utter that, um, having them use their imagination to imagine a life for their children. What would that be if you knew that you had all the resources in the world? And let them dream. And
mm,
then help them to identify a goal that is valuable to them and feels achievable. Chris, like you had mentioned earlier, going to the library, such a small goal, right?
yeah.
But it was valuable to you and it was achievable. And the outcome of that was many, many, many other times later, what came from that.
Mm,
Um, and then there is the pathway identification and problem solving. This one takes work, right? We have to identify pathways. Um, low hopers oftentimes they may have one or two pathways and they're not very viable. You may hear someone set a goal and like, this is my plan. And you're like, that's probably not a great plan. How do we teach them how to set multiple pathways and
mm,
then maneuver around obstacles? And so role play, talk about it. Imagine what it's going to be like when you're working through that. And your services are pathways for people. The relationships help support them as they're moving along those pathways. Pathways are nice because I feel like I can literally write down, like I could write down a list of pathways, right? And then we get to willpower, and how do we do that, right? It's the slippery, a little bit more slippery, one to find. Um, but we build pathways through small wins and with support through relationships.
yes.
Something that I have potentially not mentioned is that um, imagining the future we want, but creating memories of future success. So, an exercise I have people do, I encourage them to do with their clients and family members, is that you have this goal, close your eyes, you have this goal, and what would it be like when you get to the first pathway? You get to the first benchmark, and then you get to the second benchmark, and then you get to the third one. And then what happens when you meet that goal? What do
Mm,
you feel? Like, how proud of you? What does that mean to your family members? And this is a wild thing. Neuroscience has showed that you are mapping that out neurologically in your brain. So when you start moving towards that goal, your brain, it's like it's almost experienced it and it feels more achievable. It's such a powerful exercise. And then finally, like, celebrate your success. I have, my daughter's in fifth grade, and she had a talent show, and she just had dress rehearsal yesterday, and she did a little dance with her friend, and she did a solo, and she nailed it. The pride and joy on her face was so evident. And I feel like as adults, we get to an age where we think we shouldn't celebrate anymore. I don't know why. So celebrate the wins in circles, on your own, wherever you're at, that once you meet a goal, even if it is going to the library, pat yourself on the back, have a cupcake, whatever the thing is, but to celebrate your wins, your success, who you are, and who you're becoming. And that just feeds your motivation for the future.
Yes. Well, and I really relate to that whole, as adults, we think that we've gone beyond celebration. And I think that's actually something that I learned from you from this work is I'm very much of a like, okay, met that goal. What's next? Right? Like achieve that thing. Oh, finished, 10 years of ministerial school, just got licensed as a minister. Great, check. What's next? Like no stopping to just breathe and be like, oh my God, that was huge. And kind of talking about Dr. Every how you were like it was go to the library and then this and this and this. And I really do see almost the connection in my life from go to the library, just go to the library to like completing a 10-year master's level program. Like, at that time, 19-year-old me did not feel like that would
Huh.
be an achievable thing. So it didn't happen at 19, but that was like the little itty bittiest of sparks that was able to grow. And like, what a
Mhm.
gift. I wish I could remember who those people were so I could be like, oh my God, like you gave me such a gift. And then that's the gift, right? That's the gift that we're giving people in circles that this like we're creating the sparks together. It's almost like we're building the bonfire of their life together, like kind of one little twig, one little spark
Yeah.
at a time. And actually continuing down that metaphor, because now I'm excited about it, it's we have this idea that the logs right are the key component of a fire, of a campfire. But actually it's like to get it started, you need the little kindling, you need like the little, whatever it is, little tiny bits, and that's what's going to make the big fire. So I just got really excited about that metaphor. But
Oh, that's good. I haven't heard of that metaphor. That's really good. Might have to steal it. I'm just telling you.
um, it leads me back to this people who have like a lot of trauma in their past or mental health challenges or lots of, barriers and things that they've come up against. I actually have a friend that we're accountability buddies, is what we call each other. Um, and some days, we both have ADHD, so we're both a little all over the map on certain days. And some days the goal is really like get out of bed and sit in front of my computer because often, especially once you kind of have a couple of logs on the fire, that's going to be enough to then, okay, well, now I can open my email, right? Because then it's almost like the pathway opens up faster. The goals can get bigger faster because you already have those kind of mental equivalents of like, I've done this before, So now it just becomes, it's almost like a memory like a what is that rote memory sort of experience, like, oh, I sat down in front of the computer, now I open my email, now I respond now, and then 4 hours later you're like, oh, I'm working, my hope my hope kicked in kind of thing. And then some days maybe it doesn't, and you sit down in front of your computer and you're like, oh, I'm gonna do the bare minimum, and then when I have a really great day, I'm gonna do more. And so letting go of that shame, of that like that need to like, if it's not everything, if it's not perfect, if it's not all of the things, if it's not some massive step, it's not good enough. Letting go of that, building that fault tolerance is really important. So I think that's what I'm really taking away from this for me personally, as well as like just all of the circles things.
Yes. Since our first conversations, it has been like an absolute delight to work with you all in circles. And because at this point in my life, with my consulting work, I really only work with organizations that I think are doing really excellent work. The time is limited. And so to see you all sort of just take hope, and you're already doing the work of hope, but to just overlay it on your whole mission and to allow it to kind of permeate everything you're doing so that you can continue to be meaningful and to be even more strategic in what you're doing is so exciting for me. And I'm just very honored to get to be a part. So thank you for today, and just thank you for our continued partnership. Very grateful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Kamatara, for co-hosting with me. As always, I just love working with you. And Dr. Evie, thank you so much for joining us. And yes, for everything you're doing for our organization. We get to have really fun internal webinars with Dr. Evie, and she's helping to develop all this new kind of curriculum, and then these new metrics that we're collecting for our data and all of that. So we just really appreciate you, Dr. Evie. And if you are out there and getting super excited, Dr. Evie's organization is called Hope Wired, and it's Evie Trevino, EVIE TREVINO, and you can check the show notes that will be in there, evietrevino.com. Which is where you can take the assessment for yourself. You can get all kinds of materials. There's a really fantastic workbook that I actually bought and downloaded and did myself. That was just really wonderful. And and if you're part of an organization that you're like, wait, I think we're doing Hope, reach out to her. She does all kinds of consulting and things like that. As y'all can hear, I'm sure, just from our voices in this conversation, this is just such an empowering, exciting conversation to be a part of. So thank you, Dr. Evie, for being here. And then I also just very quickly want to preview season 3 of the Big View podcast. We're kind of pivoting just a little bit. So it's still going to be the Big View podcast, but we're focusing on lives transformed. Speaking of hope. And so this Live Transform series is going to be the next 2 seasons at least, season 3 and season 4. And season 4 is going to focus on our circle leaders. So all of those people that we've been talking about that are raising their hope, that are getting out of poverty permanently, that are a part of circles, we're going to be talking to them and interviewing them one-on-one. I'm going to have a special co-host for those seasons to be announced. So y'all stay posted. And it's just going to be these really phenomenal conversations from these people who are doing this work. They're kind of in the mix of it all in their own lives, really identifying what it means to thrive for them and then getting there. So please stay tuned. Click the like, subscribe, share, all of those buttons to make sure that you can know exactly when our first episode of season 3, Lives Transformed, drops in June. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Dr. Evie.